Good evening and welcome to Talk Oxford. My name's Tony Long and I'm your host for this evening. Hopefully we'll have a lively discussion on a variety of topics. But before anything else, let's introduce my guests for this evening. They are Helen Johns and Brian Holt. And rather than me describe who they are, let's let them say a bit about each of themselves. Helen, you first.
Well, my name is Helen Johns. I live near the town of Thame in Oxfordshire, and by profession I'm a copywriter. So I write copy for people's websites, for marketing brochures, for any kind of literature that people need writing, and hopefully help people to overcome the syndrome where they face the blank sheet of paper and panic and wonder what they're going to do. So that's what I do for a living. I also am involved with some other activities on a voluntary basis. So I'm involved with the theatre in Thame, and it's called the Players Theatre. And it's a 70-year-old theatre company which I'm very much attached to, and I help not on treading the boards, but I help with marketing and fundraising activities for the theatre. The third activity that I'm involved with is to do with town centre regeneration, and it's focusing on Thame Town Centre.
And we're going to come on to that in a minute.
Okay.
Thank you, Helen. And Brian.
Good evening, Tony. Well, I'm retired. So I can't possibly begin to fill my time with the sort of things that take up Helen's time. But before I retired, I was a sales and marketing director. I worked for mainly large companies in the print and design industry, having trained originally when I was a young man at the Regional College of Art in Manchester in the days when we were called commercial artists. We're now called graphic designers. But that's where I started off. I moved into publishing. I stayed in publishing, print and design. And then for a period of about 12, 14 years, my wife and I had a sojourn into the hotel industry. We both decided to leave the hotel industry at the same time, 14 years later, and I returned to industry, and my wife returned to her business, which was banking. She didn't own a bank, she worked for one. Sometimes it felt as though she owned it, but anyway. And then, you know, fortunately, the day dawned when we retired and said goodbye to all that. And now we involve ourselves with lots and lots of things like Bucks Open Studios, like the Rotary organisation, like my cricket club, where we just spend an awful lot of time raising an awful lot of money to build a new pavilion. So you often find when you retire that you wonder how on earth you found time to go to work.
Indeed. So thanks for that. Let's move on, I think, to our first subject, which is going to be about town centres. There was an article in the press over the weekend talking about the fact that more and more people are using town centres instead of the edge of town, the retail parks. Over the bank holiday weekend, all the retail parks generally lost footfall, as they call it, whereas town centres began to build up their footfall. And that seems to me to be reversing a trend of what, over the last 30 years, where it seems many town centres have been struggling to keep going, and because of all the competition from elsewhere. And now, Helen, you told us that you're a member of Thame Centre First, and that is exactly the subject that they are interested in. Tell us a bit about it.
Okay, well, Thame Centre First is a community organisation which was set up for three reasons really. One was to uphold the policies set out in Thame's neighbourhood plan, which the neighbourhood plan was produced in 2013, I think I'm right in saying, and it actually was trailblazing and won an award from the Planning Institute. And so we're trying to uphold the principles of the neighbourhood plan, which says that there's only so much retail space that Thame needs, and it should be focused on the actual town centre and the high street area. Another purpose is to really defend the town centre against the possible development of out-of-town retailing, which has cast a blight, I think it's fair to say, in many places and towns around the country. Even locally, we've got examples where out-of-town retailing has affected the town centre and led to many shops closing, putting up the wooden shutters and ceasing to trade, so that the footfall just isn't there anymore. This certainly isn't the case in Thame. It's not happened in any way. It's got a delightful high street, and it's full of a lot of very varied retail offerings and cafes and all kinds of different businesses. But what we're trying to do is make sure that the town stays that way, with a very vital high street. And what's put a sharp focus on it is the fact that there is currently a planning application which has gone into the District Council for an out-of-town retail development at Thame. And so there is a short consultation period that's just launched, actually, and so we're trying to gain support to quash, or to resist this out-of-town application, and preserve the town centre in the way that it has been for the future.
Why do you think that an out-of-town development would seriously affect the centre? Isn't there room for both in an expanding town? Because Thame is certainly an expanding town. Well,
yes, it is an expanding town, and there is planning for another, I think, 700 houses to be put on in Thame over the next few years. But within the neighbourhood plan, it does actually say that there is the retail requirement for Thame is not as large as currently envisioned in the proposals that have been submitted by Tesco, which is many times larger than it is thought to be necessary in Thame for a town of Thame size. So really, it would be going, oversized compared to the actual town's needs. The other point is that with an out-of-town superstore like that, you divert footfall away from the town centre. At the moment, in the town centre of Thame, we have 3 supermarkets. We have the Co-op, we have Sainsbury's, we have Waitrose, all of whom can be accessed from the actual town centre high street. And so it means that people can go and do their market shop, but they can also go into cafes, they can do other types of shopping at the same time.
Thanks. Brian, have you got any thoughts on
well, yes, of course.
Town centres?
To me, it's the sort of thing that affects us all, and I agree to a tremendous extent everything that Helen has just said. I know Thame as well intimately. I think it's a wonderful place. My mother-in-law moved down to Thame some years ago when my father-in-law died, and she thought it was just heaven on earth. It is a great place. It has a wide balustrade of a high street. We have lots and lots and lots of independent traders. Where I begin to disagree with Helen is that almost as many people have the right to demand out-of-town shopping as there are those that want to protect the larger towns and the smaller towns and larger villages. What I would like to see is Sunday trading, for instance, applies to stores over a certain size. If they're under a certain size, then they can open longer, or if they're over a certain size, it's 10 till 4 in the afternoon. I think if we had some sort of legislation that said that if a large village or a small town had a population of X amount, then a large on the periphery town supermarket shouldn't be allowed, and it would be clear. Instead, we have these continuous fights of people like Tesco's, and they're not alone, others as well, putting in bids to build on the outskirts of towns like Thame, whereas if legislation was in place, and they would know then that they didn't have to start buying up brownfield sites and putting them on some sort of well, not balance sheet, but some sort of log to make use of at certain times in the future.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
Thanks, Brian. Well, I think now we're due for our first break, so the next topic that we're going to be talking about will be about surveys. It seems every week there's a new survey comes about, so we're going to talk about a couple of those. We hope that you'd like to get in touch with us, and if you did, you can email us on talk@that'soxford.com, or you can tweet us at that'soxfordtv. So, see you in a minute.